When I read your bio, Dhruv, may I? Yeah. When I read your bio, interest ranging from scuba diving to flying fighter pilots. And somewhere in there is wildlife, somewhere in there is standing next to a doc who's performing some kind of intricate surgery. There is some photography somewhere. His CV reads like what Onida would have said, neighbors envy, owners pride. But what is the connect to all of these experiences?
First of all, Vaidhi, thanks a lot for getting me to speak today. And thank you for the rather untrue but glowing type of introduction that you gave me. It sort of almost makes me look forward to listening to myself speak. But before we start, I think a couple of caveats or a couple of warnings, as it were. Number one is based on what one of my teachers told me a long time back, that if you go to a carpenter for any type of problem, his solution is likely to involve hammer and nails. That's what he's most comfortable with, what he's most familiar with. So in my case, I'm very comfortable and familiar with Vedanta, and therefore whatever I'm going to say will have some connect with Vedanta. But what I want to make clear is that even though I have personally benefited a lot from Vedanta, and I have a great deal of love and regard and respect for that body of wisdom, this is not to suggest that Vedanta should or must or can work for everybody. So different people can have different paths that they follow for dealing with issues of life. And Vedanta, though it is a beautiful path, is only one of the many paths. That's the first thing I wanted to say. And also, I'm not a teacher of Vedanta. I continue to be a student, even though I've been studying it for a long time. And the second thing is people sitting and talking to a group of people who Jnana Bhatna, distributing wisdom, distributing good advice. So I think one thing one should remember is that people who give out good advice are usually people who are now too old to set a bad example. And I am in my 74th year. So if any time in the evening I appear to be distributing some good advice, please take it with a big pinch of salt. With that, Vaidhi, back to you.
So tell us about all these experiences, this wide range, breadth and depth of experience, literally depth in scuba diving, height in fighter planes. Where is the connect to all of this, and where did it come from?
I don't think there is any real connect except a personal makeup, which makes one want to explore, to learn, and maybe touch life in as many facets as possible. वो एक हिंदी पिक्चर थी ना, जिंदगी ना मिलेगी दोबारा. So you only live once, and you try and see how much more you can touch and experience in the life that you have. So I think that has really been, there's no concerted plan or effort. It's just a natural makeup which makes you want to do different things. And I think given my makeup, sometimes do them thoughtlessly, sometimes do them recklessly, sometimes carry it beyond any reasonable limit. But I have been doing these kind of things. So like a child, with most young boys, you have this vision of wanting to be a pilot, piloting captain of my own plane and stuff like that. So when you are young, not enough time, not enough money to do anything with learning flying. So much later in life, maybe in my late 40s, early 50s, I got a chance to learn flying in England, which was an amazing experience. I learned so many things which I didn't know. I happen to come from a commerce background. I'm a chartered accountant. But because of learning to fly, you learned a lot of things about physics, about engineering, about communication, navigation, things which you knew nothing about. And I always found that to be exhilarating. So did some interesting things and some memorable experiences. Your first solo, or getting lost while flying and straying into the Heathrow control zone and creating a huge amount of panic, because when a small unidentified aeroplane enters the Heathrow control zone, I mean, there is absolute panic created and there are consequences to that. And also, I think I almost killed my whole family when I took them up because of a peculiar series of instrument failures, and they didn't even realize how close they had come to death because I didn't tell them till the time we came back. And I didn't stop with learning just to simple flying of a single engine or a twin engine aeroplane. Managed to push the envelope and got into the cockpit of a Sukhoi 27 fighter in the Ukraine, in the Crimean Peninsula near the Black Sea. And the Sukhoi is an awesome aeroplane. I mean, we all go in commercial aeroplanes. At takeoff, 3,500 feet a minute, 4,000 feet a minute, we climb. The Sukhoi climbs at 45,000 feet a minute. So with full power, it is like being shot out of a rifle barrel. And then you can pull like multiple Gs, like 7 Gs. It's absolutely amazing experience. So flew Sukhois in Ukraine, flew a MiG-25 in Moscow, just outside Moscow. It's an old reconnaissance aeroplane. Before satellites happened, these were used for spying. Went up to 82,000 feet. At 82,000 feet, you can see the Earth's curvature. So if there was any doubt in your mind that the Earth is round, that doubt is addressed very conclusively. And what else? I mean, I've flown a zero gravity flight in Cape Kennedy in Florida in the US, where by flying parabolas, you can experience weightlessness for a few moments. And again, a surreal, amazing experience. So done that sort of stuff.
Talking about experience, in our conversations for preparing for this, you made this distinction between experience and experiencer. And these experiences having influenced you in some way in the journey that you subsequently took on.
So experiences are many. And I mean, like I said, flying, scuba diving, hunting, good food and wine, I mean, all that sort of stuff one has done. But at the end of it, you start, if you think about it a bit and if you step back a bit, you start figuring out the limitations of experiences. Experiences are beautiful. Experiences are life. Life is nothing but experiences. But you start beginning to think about the limitations of experiences. For experiences to deliver joy, satisfaction, happiness, which is why you undertake experiences, many things must happen. Number one, your body must cooperate, your mind must cooperate, and the environment must cooperate. If you enjoy a great meal, but if you've just been diagnosed with hypertension and diabetes, that great meal is not going to give you any joy. In fact, it might give you some grief. Or if you want to listen to a music program that you've been wanting to listen to, and that evening you had a row at work with your boss, or you had some major disagreements at home, that music program is not going to deliver any joy, even though it's an absolutely beautiful music program. And environment also plays a role, right, which is not within your control. You go to a picnic, lovely place, but now you have a swarm of flies and mosquitoes, and the picnic is no more fun. So experiences deliver pleasure or satisfaction based on many factors which are not within your control. So I think this is the first thing that you learn from a multiplicity of experiences. And if one looks at Vedanta, experiences come with three fundamental issues. One is called dukkha mishrita. It's mixed with negativity, problems. To do anything, it comes at the cost of giving up something else. If you want to build a house in Alibaug, the money that you spend in doing that stops you from doing 5 other things that you want to do, right? Number 2 is the process of building the house is a troublesome process. You go through ups and downs. You have to struggle with that. And number 3 is after you build the house, you have to start worrying about looking after it. So you staff it, then you're worried about what the hell the staff is doing. So then you appoint a security guard. Then you worry about is the security guard present or not. So now you install a CCTV camera to make sure that the security guard is there, and so on and so forth. So everything has a problem. When you do it at the cost of something else foregone. While you have it, you have to worry about maintaining it. And when it finally goes, there is some pain and regret. I had such lovely memories about that house and now it is gone, so I'm going to miss it and so on. So number one, pain of some sort is built into all experiences. Number two is what is called atriptitva. There is not enough fulfillment or satisfaction out of any experience. What you look for is total and permanent fulfillment. No experience gives you total and permanent fulfillment because as soon as something happens, your thermostat resets itself. And what was once absolutely desirable, lovely, unique, starts becoming the new baseline and it no more provides the same amount of satisfaction. Comparisons happen. I feel very good about the new car that I bought till the neighbor that I don't like has bought a fancier car and I don't like that car so much, right? Or Julius Caesar thought that his achievements were absolutely nothing when he compared himself to Alexander, who had done so much more at a younger age. And all of us here in this room, we have more powers and more conveniences than Emperor Akbar. Do we feel like that? We don't, because comparisons. So this is the other problem with any kind of experiences that we look upon for fulfillment. And the last thing about experiences is that there is this whole sense of losing independence by becoming dependent on experiences. You start with something which is pleasurable, which is a pleasurable experience. You start with doing that because it's a nice thing to do. After a little while, it becomes a need. After a little while longer, it becomes something that you can't live without. So what you have done is you converted a preference or a pleasurable option into something which has now become an absolute necessity, and your happiness, your sense of feeling good is now become totally dependent. And who wants dependence? We all want independence. Nobody likes being bound. But you start getting bound by these experiences. So these are some of the problems of experiences. So that doesn't mean that one shouldn't try different things. One should. But at the end of it, unless one has taken the time to think about the consequences of experiences and begun realizing the limitations of experiences, one has actually not derived the best out of any experience.
Let's go back to where the quest started. The quest started with questions about 40 years ago. Here is a young man, very young, to become director of finance in a large group, Raymond's group, and decides and goes through a lot of disquiet, let's say. A lot of disquiet, questions that keep bugging him, and he gets up and leaves a career in a corporation in pursuit of finding answers to these questions. What were those questions?
I think some of them occur by accident, some of them occur to all of us, but very often we sort of sweep them under the carpet and we don't really pay too much attention to those questions. In my case, I think it was really working closely with people who had much more money and power and attainments than I could ever dream of achieving for myself. And I started wondering that I'm working like from 8 o'clock in the morning to 10 o'clock in the night. I'm traveling 3 days of the week. I have children who are growing up and I have no time for them. I buy books, but I can't read them. I buy music, but I can't listen to them. And I'm doing all this for the sake of money, position, prestige, power. Now I see people closely, very wealthy, very powerful, very successful by most standards of the world. And I see them being as petty, as hostile, as suspicious, as unhappy as anybody else. So then you start wondering, this game plan of life that I have set out for myself, how valid is it? And if it is not a valid game plan, then should I not be doing something to see if there is another game plan of life? So I think from there, this type of disquietude, the questions then become very, very different. I mean, what is the nature of myself who's looking for answers? What is the nature of the world that I'm confronting with? What is the nature of the creator of this world, or is there a creator to begin with? And how do I find lasting and kind of permanent fulfillment in dealing with this, because if other people who have achieved so much more haven't seemed to have found it, how am I going to find it? So these are the type of questions which occur. For most of us, either there are so many other pressures that we can't really pay too much credence to these questions, or we sweep them under the carpet, or there is safety in numbers. Nobody else is questioning this game plan, so why should I be the oddball who questions this game plan, right? So we carry on, and also we have the belief that I will do the same thing again and again, but maybe a little better, a little harder. The next million, the next relationship, the next vacation home, whatever, will fulfill the problem. But I think we need to remember what Einstein defined as insanity. To do the same thing again and again and expect a different answer the next time. But we don't seem to learn from our own experience, and we let our hope conquer our experiences. But for some people, these questions become bothersome to the point that you need to address
You
them.
have this disquiet, this mental inequilibrium state. And there was somebody who went through that a couple of thousand years ago and decided to renounce everything and go away. But you didn't. You stayed in. And when that somebody, which is Gautam Buddha, when he came back after achieving his enlightenment and was giving a discourse like this, his wife in the audience asked him, did you have to go away to find out all this, or could you have stayed at home and found out all this? And the answer was,
That he said that I need not have gone away, I need not have left the palace to find what I did, but to figure out that I need not have left, I had to leave. So that was Gautam Buddha's supposed answer to this question. But I think, look,
so you didn't go that distance. You stopped.
Everybody can't, everybody doesn't have the mental makeup to become a sannyasi, which is our tradition. Everybody doesn't have, we are trapped by multiple things, including our own desires, including our own fears and weaknesses, including the commitments that we have to people around us. So all these things come together and stop many of us from doing what logically should be the progressive path of a spiritual inquiry, which is sannyasa. But everybody cannot and even need not do it. But what you need to do is to be in some fashion a mental sannyasi, which means that you stop behaving or believing that you are the controller of your own body and mind. Stop believing that you are the controller of other people. Stop believing that you can actually give happiness to others. Stop believing that you can get by with continuing your old lifestyle, the same desires, the same pressures. With 1 hour of Vedanta a day in some fashion, you will make a big difference to your life. You need to become a little more dispassionate, a little more discriminating, and to some extent become a mental sannyasi of sorts, though not physically, to actually make any real benefit out of a so-called spiritual quest.
But when you embark on a journey, and for a lot of us here, clearly sannyas is not an option, right? So yes, it's actually possibly more challenging to live within the context of the physical material world and still go through this mental detachment, being dispassionate. Right? Did you put any goals, milestones to yourself through this journey?
No, not at all. The goal was only to address the disquietude within myself. The goal was to try and find some answers to fundamental questions which caused me a lot of trouble. It's like having a pebble in the shoe. You're not comfortable till the time that pebble is removed. And in the bargain, I tried all sorts of things to try and address those questions. I first figured that I couldn't address those questions if I had a full-time, high-pressure job, because there was not enough time, there was not enough mental space to think about these rather nebulous, somewhat subtle issues. So I had to take a rather reckless and stupid decision to quit a well-paying job when I had a family, old parents, young children, not enough resources within the family, but still took the in retrospect, a daft decision, maybe irresponsible, to actually quit a good job without quite knowing how I was going to deal with the needs of the family, and started to study some format of philosophy, started to try to get into Western philosophy, because by my education, the only philosophy worth studying seemed to be Western philosophy. By a good piece of accident, I got involved with Indian philosophy and ultimately to Vedanta. And that is what really I found my home there.
And on a journey like this, where you don't know what the destination is, you need some kind of a guide, a teacher. And you went through multiple teachers. How do you know this teacher is no more good for me? I need to go to another teacher. When the subject is, as you said, so nebulous, so subtle. Most of us go through worshipping teachers, accepting things as gospel. But in a subject like this, how do you retain that level-headedness to say, yes, the person is my teacher, but I will resist BS?
Our tradition requires Shraddha, faith, as one of the sort of pillars of an adhikari, of somebody who's eligible to study Vedanta. Shraddha or faith is one of the requirements, faith in the teaching, faith in the teacher. But the tradition also says, Shankaracharya was one of the biggest exponents of Advaita Vedanta way back in the 8th century. He said that if 1,000 scriptures say fire is cold, I would reject all those 1,000 scriptures. So our traditions require 3 things to gel together for the teaching to become valid and for you to accept the teaching. One is Shruti, what the scriptures say. That you start by initially taking on faith, initially giving the teachings a chance to work on you. Then there is something called Yukti. It must gel with your logic, with your understanding. A teaching can be translogical, it cannot be illogical. So that is the second test that you use. And the third thing is Anubhav. Your experiences must ultimately corroborate what the teaching says. And unless the teacher is leading you on a path where all these 3 things are met, is capable of teaching you what the scriptures say, is capable of answering all the doubts that your mind raises, and is capable of making you see that there is no contradiction between your experiences and what you are being taught, you then come to the conclusion that this teacher, possibly now, you might want to move on to somebody who is bigger, better, more experienced, or maybe somebody who gels with your personality better. Need not be better, but gels with you better.
And it was really your third teacher that you settled down and spent considerable amount of time. And even with that person, at some point you said, no, I need to move on.
No, I think in the beginning I used to go to somebody who was more a scholar of Vedanta, and you very early discovered that being a scholar of Vedanta, you can write a lovely book on Vedanta. You can deliver a brilliant lecture on Vedanta. And Vedanta need not touch you at all where it matters, even though you can write an amazing book and you can deliver a fantastic lecture. It need not touch you at all. So you ultimately need to find a teacher whose lifestyle, whose personality, whose thinking really gels with what he's teaching. And the last teacher I started with a scholar, so had scholarship, but didn't really have the spirit of Vedanta. Then went to one of these new age teachers, the shortcut teachers, the direct path of Vedanta teachers. There is a whole host of them. Works for some people, but it certainly didn't work for me because these shortcuts don't work. Ultimately, I came to the sort of classical high road of Vedanta, Shankaracharya's version of Vedanta. And with that teacher, and later on by teachers created by him, who were in the same genre as him, I haven't had the need to look any further.
Since you've referred to Vedanta enough times, I don't know how many of us are initiated to the subject Vedanta or Upanishad, which are used interchangeably. The literal meaning of Upanishad is what I'm experiencing now, which is sitting next to the teacher.
I'm not.
That's the literal meaning of Upanishad. And Vedanta, Vedant, the end goal of the Vedas is Vedanta.
It is.
Help us relate to this concept of what it is. And then tell us how much is it close to religion and how much is it away from religion.
The idea that you can capture Vedanta in a few sentences in a short format like this is a bit defective. This is like asking somebody, can you define music in a couple of sentences? I could say that music is an arrangement of vocal or instrumental sounds which has rhythm, harmony, or melody. Does it actually connect you with what music really is? The magic, the joy, the beauty of music? But this is a good, precise definition. There is nothing wrong with this definition of music, except that it does not convey any heart and soul of music. So similarly, if one wants we are all used to these bullet points and executive summaries and braces. So if one wants that of Vedanta, then Adi Shankaracharya himself came up with something, like I said, in 800 AD. He said, I can summarize the content of 1,000 scriptures in one verse. And that one verse was, Brahma Satyam Jagan Mithya Jivo Brahmaiva Napara. Basically says that there is only one reality called Brahman, and everything else that you see and experience is a temporary and insubstantial appearance on and off that reality, and that reality is not different than you. This is a capsulated version of what Vedanta is, but it doesn't do any good. I mean, this is quite meaningless to listen to it like this. Ultimately, Vedanta is a remedy to a disease, and it is to the disease of three fundamental issues which we all experience. All human beings ultimately have three basic universal needs or problems. The first one is the need to continue to remain in existence, to be alive. And it's called, in Sanskrit, it's called jijivisha, the need to be alive. The second thing is to know. We always want to know, right? Everything we want to be aware, we want to know more and more. It's called jignasa in Sanskrit. And the third one is we want to experience fulfillment at all times, in all places, and in all situations. That's called bubuksha in Sanskrit. Now, these are fundamental needs which are hardwired into us. The need to stay alive, the need to know more and more, and the need to experience total and lasting fulfillment. There is no way in which, by doing whatever we do with our usual approach to life, there is no way in which any of us is going to be immortal. There is no way in which any of us is going to know all that is to be known. There is no way in which any of us is going to experience total and lasting fulfillment. Vedanta is a solution to this universal problem. And we must remember, many people write off this problem, saying, okay, maybe there is no solution, correct? But we must remember, hunger, or the presence of hunger, presupposes the presence of bread. In nature, there is no need without a corresponding means of satisfying it. And Vedanta is the corresponding answer to these fundamental needs that we have. How it does it, the way in which it works is really too complicated and too complex to get into in such a short format. But that is what Vedanta is all about. And it asks some very fundamental questions, but I don't know if you have time to get into those questions.
I do want to come to the second part, but before I get there, it's absolutely fascinating. This is the 8th speaker we have, and folks who have attended enough sessions, there is some thread connecting these. Adil, you'll recall Vaidish spoke about his interest in flying and how he didn't make it, and then that took him somewhere else. In the very first session, he spoke about nature on the bank beneath our feet, which is the equation that we have with nature, and you're talking about some of these things are coming back here. The second part of the question I had, the perception it is intertwined with religion.
Okay.
And in contemporary society, religion has different reactions. So, is pursuit of Vedanta, study of Vedanta, is it fundamentally religious?
It comes packaged in a religious book, right? It comes from the Vedas. The bulk of the Vedas are religious in nature. They talk about deities, they talk about incantations, they talk about poems of praise to various deities, they talk about meditations. But the last part of the Vedas, maybe the last 5% of the Vedas, are not religious at all, except that they use religion only as a preparatory mechanism. But they are in and themselves are not at all religious. So Vedanta becomes relevant to us not because we are Hindu or we are Indians or whatever. It becomes relevant to us because we are human beings. And you need not have any belief in any God. In fact, if you go to the very end of Vedanta's teaching, it is in some ways atheistic. It does not accept the reality of God the way we take God. So, but that is at a later stage. At the earlier stages, it certainly uses devotion. It certainly uses God, but as a crutch, as a wire media to get to something beyond God. So, religion is actually a way of life. Vedanta is a view of life. And there is a fundamental difference between a way of life and a view of life. And Vedanta is a view of life which is actually far removed from religion. But one thing we must say about the Vedic religion, it is an amazing thing. And Vedanta does something very amazing. In religion, you understand God to be this perfect being, right? Almighty, all-knowing, all-compassionate. But the problem with the idea of God is He's a perfect being, but His existence is doubtful. Which one of us has seen God? The other side of this story is your existence is never in doubt. You never doubt that you exist. Your existence is perfect, but you are imperfect. You have limitations, you have problems, you have issues. So now you have the situation, a perfect God whose existence is doubtful. You whose existence is doubt-free, but you are imperfect. How do you reconcile these two and arrive at doubt-free, perfect existence? Vedanta is a method of reconciling these two and arriving at a doubt-free, perfect existence. Does that, in any fashion, provide some insight?
No, there's no quiz at the end of it. but we need to stay on this a little more. Doubt-free, yes.
So, is it intellectual or is it experiential?
I'm sorry, say again.
Is it intellectual as an exercise or is it experiential?
See, Vedanta is ultimately recognition of something, recognition of your own true nature, which currently there is a confusion about our own true nature. So recognition always has to be by knowledge, and knowledge is always intellectual. Right? There is no other form of knowledge. Knowledge is always in the mind, is always by using intellect. So Vedanta is an intellectual pursuit in the search of a particular type of knowledge. But the end result of Vedanta is not purely in the mind. It transcends the mind. So you're using your mind to go to a reality which is actually above and beyond the mind. But you need to use the mind.
Sure. Related question. You said there's a view of life and a way of life. So once you got educated by the Vedantic view of life, how did your way of life change? That's more relevant to all of this.
Changes in many, many ways, Akhil. It changes in the way, and some of it is very subtle. Sometimes it is more internal than external. So you might continue to do the same things that you did even before Vedanta. But internally now, there is elbow room, there is a sense of freedom, and there is a sense of not being bound by what you do. So, and like I was telling Vaidi the other day, I think one of the consequences, beautiful consequence of even some element of Vedanta is that you stop taking yourself so seriously. You do whatever you do it as well as you can, because you are in the game, you have to play the game. But treat the game as a game. don't take yourself so seriously, don't make yourself the fulcrum of everything. And I think this is one of the greatest consequences of Vedanta. So you can enjoy whatever you do, you can go through whatever ups and downs life brings, but with a certain relaxed attitude and a certain sense of freedom despite whatever ups and downs.
The exact quote that I made notes of, which he said, is don't take yourself seriously, but whatever you do it seriously. That was the subtle distinction.
This is actually what karma yoga in a technical sense is all about, right? You have what is called an Ishvara Arpana Buddhi. You do what you do almost like an offering to the divine, which means you do it very well. You don't want to do something half-hearted for the divine. But at the end of it, you got to have a prasada buddhi to the result. So when the result comes, even if you get a leaf or a petal of a flower or a tiny bit of a mithai from a mandir, you accept it with gratitude and reverence. Similarly, whatever be the result, you understand that you are the author of your action, but you are not the author of the result, because the result it consists of many other factors apart from your action, and therefore you accept it gracefully, and that gives you a certain sense of freedom and latitude in life.
So it emanates from religion, but it goes beyond religion, and therefore in its evolved state, it's actually agnostic to religion.
Yes, in an evolved state it is, and Vedanta is not a monopoly of the Hindu culture or of the Vedas. There are other traditions like Sufism in Islam, or mystical streams of Christianity, or Taoism out of China, which speak almost in an identical language as the Upanishads. So it is not a monopoly of our tradition, but where our tradition scored. This is like saying that once upon a time people went to America to study business management, because America was the place for doing business management. Businesses were not managed before America came, or people in any other country didn't manage businesses. Of course they did. But America developed a lovely method of teaching business management, which is why people went to American colleges for business management. Similarly, Vedanta is not unique in what it is saying, but it is unique in the teaching methodology that it has developed, which makes something which is very often inaccessible or mystical, it makes it accessible to a qualified seeker. So that is what is special about Vedanta.
The next term that comes, if it's not religious, is this term spiritual, which all of us use very liberally and loosely. Right?
Spiritual is one of these terms which are so, it's like soul in Christianity or whatever. It's a term which is so nebulous. So for many people, spirituality is related to religion. That's how the term actually started from early Christianity. Spirituality related to the spirit of Christ, and that's how the word spirituality came about. For many people, spirituality is meditation. For many people, spirituality is just leading an ethical, moral, upright life. For many people, chanting is spiritual. Going to a place of great natural beauty, and you can say it is a spiritual experience. But as far as Vedanta is concerned, spirituality is anything that you do to discover the truth of yourself and to stay or remain established in the truth. That in Vedanta is the only meaning of spirituality. In common parlance, we can use many other meanings, but in Vedanta, finding the truth of yourself and remaining established in the truth, that is spirituality.
Let me turn it over and not hog the...
If there's no question, I'll ask.
No. In fact, I, of course, ask the question and then I will ask you a question.
Okay. So, one of the concepts is all these Mahavakyas, you are that. You cannot prove you are that. You have to just believe you are that.
You cannot prove, but you have to.
You have to believe you are that.
No.
So tell us, how do you prove us that you are that?
How do you know you are here? Do you need any proof? It is self-evident, right?
You
No, one second. your existence is self-evident? Is there any outside proof needed for your
Let's say
existence?
I'm not body, I'm not my mind. Let me answer your question. So I have proof. My body is here, my mind is here. But who I am as per the Vedas, I don't know that I'm here.
See, Akhil, there is no doubt about your own existence, right? Only trouble is that your existence is mixed up with the limitations of your body and mind.
Yes.
And your existence is a self-evident foregone conclusion for which nobody needs any proof. The problem is you need to dispel the associations of your existence with a myriad other things that we've gotten. And it is self-evident. But you have to, this is not a subject which will occur to you or will appeal to you immediately. You have to go through a little process of studying with a proper teacher, give it a little bit of time, and then test it against your own experience. Nobody's saying bye, but you have not been through that process from whatever little I know of you. And without that process, it's very difficult to appreciate
most people
this.
don't go through that process.
I know, but Vedanta has never been for most people. For most people, it is religion. For most people, it is eat, drink, and make merry. For most people, Vedanta is not of any interest, and it was not designed for most people. We have so many other. Our religion actually has so many variations. It is pitched at so many levels to cater to different levels of needs, different levels of emotional maturity, of intellectual maturity. So Vedanta was not for, there is a verse in the Bhagavad Gita which says 1 in 1,000, several thousand want to even explore this. Out of that, only 1 out of the several thousand will begin to appreciate it, and ultimately only 1 within that will actually reach the end of this journey. So it is subtle, it is intuitive, it takes time. And there's actually one Sanskrit verse which says that learning of Vedanta, 1/4 comes from your own effort by the time that you spend in learning, 1/4 comes from the teacher, 1/4 comes from interaction with fellow students, and the last 4th comes by passage of time, by incubation. So you need to have spent time yourself, you need to have had a proper teacher, you need to have had interaction with fellow seekers, and you need to give it enough time. So unless we do all this, one can argue and find faults, but one needs to give this journey a little bit of time and effort.
He's written a book on commonality across religions. So Neil, we need to sign him up to talk about
You
the
said religion is
intersection.
not the subject here.
Exactly, the intersection of these two, not so much as religion as the subject, but the intersection of where Vedanta goes beyond religion and its commonality links to across societies. But that's for another discussion. Just one second.
I just wanted to ask, how does the seeker know that he has reached his goal? That
I
what he is
haven't,
seeking?
so I can't answer that. So
That's a very deep question, and I know it may not be easy to answer, but how does one know one is seeking?
Where the answer from the Upanishads, like I said, not from my personal experience, but the answer from the Upanishads, says where all the doubts in your heart are resolved, where all your fears have gone, and where you sort of experience an unbroken state of equanimity, peace, and contentment, then you have reached the end of the journey.
Like an enlightenment moment. Is that what it is?
It's not a moment. I don't think, understanding can happen in a flash, but fruit of that understanding can take time to actually, like a Polaroid picture, you can take the picture quickly, but by the time it develops and shows what it is, it takes a little time. I don't think there is like one moment you're not enlightened, next
No,
moment,
like
bang, you're enlightened. It doesn't work like that.
So it's complete peace of mind, what I understand.
Yes, absolutely. And what a lovely
Simple
thing.
language.
But that is what we are all looking for, right? Ultimately, what are we looking for?
Equanimity.
In any situation, complete peace
Absolutely, absolutely. It doesn't mean that there won't be short ups and downs. Huh?
That's fine.
There is no way in which the mind is not affected. But it is the amplitude of the fluctuation in the mind which gets cut off, and the quickness with which you regain your equilibrium. You will momentarily, no enlightened person is not going to feel grief if somebody close to him dies. And it would be ridiculous to expect that, because for that you need a dead mind. And Vedanta is not about a dead mind, it is about a very live mind. But it is to do with the amount of ups and downs and the quickness with which you come back to a stable state.
Like a voltage stabilizer.
Sorry?
Like a voltage stabilizer.
Absolutely.
Neil.
Hi. So, two questions. They sound a little funny, but when I was maybe 17 or 18 and studying in college in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, I was fortunate enough to take a 4-month course in the Bhagavad Gita.
In?
The Bhagavad Gita.
Ah,
And I did another 4-month course on religion and science. And I did another 4-month course on life after death and near-death experiences. And that's the phase in life when you're doing all this soul searching and you're trying to figure out what am I supposed to do. And Gita basically said, okay, now do your duty to the best of your ability, don't be attached to the outcome. And I said, okay, this is simple. Out of everything I've learned, I'm going to follow this. This is going to be my mantra. So are you telling me now, if I had to go back in time and had to study Vedanta as a view of life, a way of life, or a philosophy, I would have done everything differently?
see, there's a big difference between two approaches, right? One approach, some of the things that you talked about, it leads to freedom for the body and mind. The goal is to have a better mind, a better body, better emotions, better relationships, more success, more experience of happiness, freedom for the body and mind. Vedanta doesn't talk about ultimately. It might initially address that, but the ultimate objective is very different. It is freedom from the body and mind, irrespective of what happens to the body, irrespective of what happens to the mind, to discover that what you truly are always was, always is, and always will remain totally unaffected. That is what Vedanta is about. Freedom from the body and mind. Most of the things that we do, all the weekend retreats that we go to and everything, they are basically geared towards freedom for the body and mind, not from the body and mind. Because Vedanta is different.
Just one second. You correlate this to an earlier speaker, Ashok Khanna. Ashok Khanna was talking about find you, be happy, but that was freedom for the body and mind. So, in fact, this very specific point we had a little bit of a discussion in, and this one is freedom from the body and mind, and that's what Vedanta is. Sorry, go ahead.
So now, obviously there's a lot to learn. Can you recommend a way forward for some of us who like to learn more? Is there a course or
I think first, this Vedanta story, there are steps to it, right? If I can use a few Sanskrit terms, there is Jnana Jignasa, there is the curiosity to actually learn about Vedanta. Then the other thing, Jnana Jignasa, then Jnana Yogyata. You must become eligible to be a recipient of this knowledge. Doesn't work automatically for everybody. You need to have a certain frame of mind, a certain leisure, a certain intellectual ability, a certain emotional stability to actually be able to even learn from Vedanta. Then Jnana Prapti, to find a teacher who is going to try and deal with the questions and teach you Vedanta. And then ultimately Jnana Nishtha, having got curiosity, having got the eligibility, having found a teacher is not enough. Ultimately, this knowledge from second-hand knowledge, I heard this, I was told this, must become first-hand knowledge. Only then and then will it work for you. Otherwise, you'll be good enough to deliver like I'm doing right now, talk about it, deliver a lecture, write a book, but it is not going to change your life where it matters. So there are multiple things that one needs to do. And I think the starting point is to create some space for yourself. We are so hung up with our desires and our agendas. We lead such hyperactive lives that there is no time and space. And we continuously believe that the next possession, the next holiday, whatever will do it bigger, better, look better, feel good, look good. Our whole life goes in that. But if you step back a little and modulate your desires, modulate your emotions a little bit, and then look for a teacher, then I think that would be a good way to look at Vedanta. Difficult to find a good teacher, especially in Bombay, and with the distance, traffic, commuting time, and so on. But with effort can be done. And if you can't find one sort of proximate to you, one can also go for a short-term immersive course somewhere for a week or 10 days. Just as we go on holidays or vacations, we make time for that. One could make time for this. But the kind of teacher you go to is also important, because there are types and types of teachers, and some of them don't know, some of them know, but they want to mislead you because they have a different agenda. So one has to be a little careful about who one goes to.
But why not self-study?
Because look at what you're trying to figure out. You are trying to figure out the true nature of yourself. Who is going to figure out the true nature of yourself? You, right? This is like saying that the eye should see itself. Can the eye see itself? It can see everything else. The only thing the eye can't see is itself. You want to know yourself. The only thing you can't know is yourself, because you are the knower. How do you know yourself? How does the eye see itself? But the see an eye and mirror, if you have, you can see the eye. A teacher and the words of the Upanishads operate like a word mirror, which make it possible for you to see yourself, which is otherwise not possible.
And so this would be Gyan Yoga in a sense, right?
Yeah, so, there is this, ever since Swami Vivekananda happened, and he got this broken up into 4 bits: Bhakti Yoga, Raja Yoga, Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga. Traditional Vedanta has a slightly different take, and Swami Vivekananda was not traditional Vedanta. He was very much Vedanta, but not traditional Vedanta. So, in our case, Shankaracharya said, Jnanam evam moksha. The only final method of arriving at a solution to problems is knowledge. But knowledge by itself doesn't work. If you want to cook rice, what cooks rice? Heat, fire. Fire cooks rice. If I light a fire and if I put some rice in it, will it give you something that you can use? You will only get burnt rice. So you need a pot, you need water, but you need heat. Fire cooks rice, but fire will not cook rice and produce a usable result unless you have a pot and water. So knowledge produces liberation. But knowledge by itself, like fire by itself, cannot help us with rice. Knowledge by itself is not enough. There are peripheral things which are not sufficient but which are necessary.
That's the context. The pot is the context.
Pot and the water is the preparatory stuff. Fire is the thing which actually cooks. But pot and water is not enough by itself.
Yeah, pot
And
and water
fire by
itself.
itself can cook, but it won't produce a good result.
So it's actually not just a philosophy, it's actually getting to know yourself.
Absolutely.
So the experience
Actually,
and the
the
learning
word
is
philosophy, Nikhil, is not used in our tradition. We use the term darshan. Darshan is a viewpoint. We never claim to have a final answer to anything. We are only saying it's a perspective, it's a viewpoint. We call it a darshan, and we are saying this is not unlike Western philosophy. This is not a search of truth for truth's sake. It is not an answer to all possible questions. It is only a remedy to a personal problem of a lack of fulfillment, and that is all that it is designed to do.
and it's an individual experience.
Absolutely.
So it's that question that Akhil was asking is that, look, what is the nature of reality?
One,
Right? And those
see,
are
these
those
are,
are all very philosophical questions.
so we have to deal with them.
Actually, I have a difficulty.
We have to deal with those questions, and Vedanta does, but you need some time, you need proper teaching. This is not something that you can discuss it over a short period of time, because these are very subtle, very counterintuitive things. And on the face of it, they seem certainly translogical. So you need a little exposure in a particular format for this to begin to make sense.
There is a guru amongst us, the meditation guru, Sheetal.
Meditation is great,
I
but
can't tell you how enjoying this. Yeah, everything that you're saying, and it just, I think, so resonate. And I mean, it's lovely. I just spent the last 9 days in Rishikesh studying the Patanjali Yoga Sutras, and so yes, it's lovely to just listen to everything.
Thank you.
So much.
I have to say I agree. I'm very far from any meditation person at all. In fact, I don't attend, but I found it really interesting.
there's an interesting one on meditation, because ultimately the problem is the mind and the solution is also the mind, right? So how do you deal with the mind? So there are 2-3 different ways of dealing with it. One is called mano nasha. You delete the mind. You can get drunk, you can take drugs or whatever, or you just kill the mind. So that is one option which is obviously not a good or practical option. The second option is Patanjali, meditation, mano laya. Patanjali defined yoga as chitta vritti nirodha, right? That is what he defined yoga as. So the second thing is to have a mind which is completely quiet, which makes you fairly useless to do anything practical. If you are in samadhi, what are you going to do, right? And the last thing is mano badha, which is what Vedanta does. If you have a mirror in a room and you see your own image, there will appear to be 2 people, you, the physical you, and the image in the mirror. Do you need to break the mirror to discover that you are the only reality in the room? You only need knowledge to understand that you are the only reality in the room. That is mano badha, which is the way Vedanta works.
Why can't you be our teacher?
Sorry, say again.
Why can't you be our teacher?
I saw.
Yeah, I also find it.
Sorry, I missed that comment.
Lots of money if you're going to be the teacher.
We donated to Sweden.
Done.
He's achieved detachment from money.
That will be a problem. His family hasn't.
Okay. Any more questions for
Can I just ask one?
Sure.
So would it be true that to think that you can't just one kind of pick Vedanta? No, isn't it? Doesn't it depend on your past lives, on your karma, on where you are, and what you are capable of receiving from the point of view of your karmic past? I mean, aren't they all connected? I mean, can just anybody say, okay, I think I'm going to try this? And
There is a verse in a book called the Vivek Chudamani, and it says in Sanskrit, Durlabham Trayamaivat Ishvara Anugraha Hetukam. 3 things are rare and difficult to find, and they only come to you because of the grace of God. And then the next line says, Manushyatam Mumukshutvam and Mahapurush Samshraya. To be born a human being, to have a quest for this knowledge, and then to find the right teacher to guide you on this quest. So all these 3 things are supposed to be Ishvara Anugraha Hetukam. Now, whether you believe in Ishvara, you believe in past life karma, you believe in dumb luck, you believe in chance, whatever, but there is an X factor in all our lives, and there is no need to believe that we are also smart and clever, that we will on our own, by our own effort, come and hit Vedanta and discover it. Many things need to come to place for this need to study Vedanta to occur. So no place for false egotism in all this.
Let's end on that high. Can you talk a little bit? The first thing you said is to be born a human.
Mm-hmm.
I guess as distinct from an animal.
Mm-hmm.
What is that distinction?
I think, let me not keep on reciting Sanskrit phrases, there is one, but anyway. I think ultimately human beings are different from animals in 2 very fundamental aspects. One is a level of intelligence which seems to be better than all or maybe most animals, or at least we like to believe that. But number two, and more importantly, is a sense of self which gives us a sense of free will or agency. I can raise my hand, I need not raise my hand, I can raise it another way. I have a feeling that I have a freedom to do any of this. And I have a capability of self-judgment, which no animal has. The horse which wins the derby doesn't feel superior to the other horses which lost. And no cow goes to a plastic surgeon saying, my horn is crooked, please make it nice for me. But human beings do all this because we have a sense of free will and we sit in a sense of judgment. If we do not use our intelligence, our free will, our sense of judgment of our own selves to discover the truth of ourselves, we now become like an aeroplane which has never flown, or a cheetah which has never run, or a fish which has never swum. So we should be using our unique capabilities, which makes us different from animals, to make this unique inquiry which no other living creature seems to be able to make.
So we're making a good start. So of the three things needed, being human, pursuit of knowledge, and finding a guide to you, we've ticked the first box. So we're 1/3 of the way there. Yeah? So let's look for the second and third steps. Before we close, first and foremost, let's give a round. Thank you.